I think that just as we're living in a nuclear age, we have grown so tremendously in scientific knowledge. It doesn't seem too much to say that men can begin to awaken to the fact that they haven't grown enough spiritually and haven't recognized their spiritual capacities.
Once something like eating is death, then you've struck at the very heart of life. The enemy of the older radical theories may have been the ruling class, but today the stakes of whether we will reform ourselves into a new kind of human being, a new kind of society, whether we will find selves worth being, the stakes of it are simply life itself.
Modernity has created promises that it has no ability to keep. What this means is that we're a society of disembedded individuals, stuck in the impossible situation of being alone together. And what was understood as emancipation has proved to be a form of isolation. It is important to understand that what I am telling you is not simply a cultural history. It's a description of the story that shapes every single person that you know. This is why there is a rise in mental illness. It's absolutely concurrent with the disembedding of the individual, because individuals can't constitute themselves by the very nature of the case. Subjectivity cannot sustain its own weight. We need others to tell us. But we've been given an ethical mandate by the Enlightenment that tells us that that's immoral, that nobody should constrain us.
Well, welcome back to another Dustbowl Diatribes. We're here with Alfredo Poggi, who's an associate professor of modern languages at the University of North Georgia. And he just published a book called Magical Realism, Latin American Theology, and the Appearance of a Pre-Critical Theory, Mary versus Ideology. And it's with Lexington Books just this year. So congratulations on that. And I did want to just read just a little bit of what's on your website from the university, because I thought it did a really good job of capturing who you are or kind of what you're putting forth. It says, Dr. Poggi holds that the humanities cannot be reduced to an analysis of the power struggles between the oppressed and their oppressors. They should also provide edifying, constructive means of interpreting all dimensions of reality. The work of interpretation can promote the search for unity and harmony between human beings and nature, extending even to the point of connection or encounter with the divine, the absolute, and the transcendent. Dr. Poggi's research agenda takes into account religious experiences as real content in texts and not just as poetic interpretive devices. He believes that there is an ontological value in the experience of divine encounter and a theology that provides existential meaning, enriches the humanities, challenges Eurocentric secularism, and inspires students. That's a lot, and we are very much looking forward to talking to you tonight. So welcome. Did you want to say anything about yourself before we get started?
Well, thank you so much. Well, first, thank you so much for the invitation. I think it is an honor for me to be with you, and I think that your discussions on YouTube, it is a proof that the best discussion today are on social media rather than at universities. So I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation. Yes.
Well, we wanted to ask you how you see your role in the world, and we always, at the beginning of our interviews, like to ask people what your diatribe is, which means like what is the thing that most compels you, the issue that drives you?
Yes. Well, let me tell you a little bit about my story. I'm from Argentina. I was born in a small city in the middle of Argentina called Rio Cuarto. It is an agricultural city. I have a big family, a strong community there. There are very interesting things about that city. It has a very good university, public university. And I know you like philosophy. There in Rio Cuarto, the Philosophy of Liberation Manifesto was signed by people like Enrique Dussel, Scanone. Philosophy of Liberation is perhaps the most influential Latin American philosophy. It's very interesting that it was in that city. And also other very interesting thing about my life and the city, my childhood, is that close to my house, there was a small parish. It was like a house. And there was a very young priest who was Victor Manuel Fernandez, who is the head of for the doctrine of the faith today, and it is the Pope Francis' right hand. And he was a very young priest. It was during my childhood, so he was my priest in some way, my first priest. Nevertheless, because of my father's job, we have to move to other places in the north of Argentina, and then I moved to Caracas, Venezuela. Where I finished my high school and my college. I studied media studies. So I worked for some media companies, but then I needed to come back to the academia. So I studied a master in philosophy at night during many years, and then I started as an instructor in social theory in that university, and then I worked for a research center that I coordinated research on poverty and democracy there, social science research. And at the same time, I was producing a TV show in a small Catholic channel that promoted people engaged in charities in poor neighborhoods. And I think during those years shaped my agenda, my research agenda, and my approach in many ways. Probably I can say three things. One, something very interesting about my university there. It was a Jesuit. It is a Jesuit university. It is a private university. Most of the students are middle class or high class, but it is in the middle of a poor neighborhood. It's in the middle of a slum, a poor neighborhood, and all the classrooms they have huge windows, and all the offices they have huge windows, so you can see all the poor houses through the windows. So when you are explaining something in your classroom, if it is too abstract, if it is too disconnected with reality, the contrast between the reality and what you're saying, it's so high, so strong that it sounds absurd. It's like, what are you saying? And so this pushed me to always look what is going on in reality, especially with the poor and the working class. And so I always try to look, what is going on with the poor, and also if you disconnect yourself from reality, it is dangerous in context like Latin America or Caracas. Caracas is the second most dangerous city in the world. So you have to always be connected with reality. You have to have like a naive realism, because if you disconnect with reality, it can cause you something bad. And I have an example that proves that, is that one time I was driving from my philosophy class. We were talking about Kant and the impossibility to penetrate reality, the things in themselves. And I was driving and I didn't see a car. The car hit my car. The other car continued, and I stayed in the middle of the night in front of one of the most dangerous poor neighborhoods. And I was alone, so I was calling my family, my friends. And then the mafia, the gangs started going down. They went around me. I had the cheapest car in the market, so they couldn't take me anything, but I was scary. Then the police came and they went away, and the police said, "Oh, you know what? It's your fault. So you have to give us money." And I don't have money. So there is an ATM close to here. And it was horrible. And then my friends came, so they went away. I gave them $20, something like that. But my point is that you cannot have a very intellect. I mean, you cannot doubt about reality. You cannot doubt about reality. You cannot go through the modern epistemology in some sense. You have to be there and just be careful because you can die. And this is, in some sense, one of my approach. Is a kind of naive realism, but it is because I understand that in contexts like Latin America and other contexts, people don't cannot disconnect with reality. The second thing that I learned during those years is that when you go to this poor neighborhood, there are no institutions, there are no law in some sense, and I saw that Christianity is so important for these people. I mean, it's the only source for hope or for social change or social improvement. So I realized the importance of the Christian faith in very difficult situation when there are no institutions, where there are nothing. At the end, you have your faith, and you can see a lot of churches there working for the poor, and this was very pedagogical for me. And finally, I saw how when I arrived to Venezuela, actually, I lived in an apartment, middle class apartment, and in the third floor, Hugo Chavez was living there. Hugo Chavez, and so I didn't know he was because I was from Argentina, so but I met him in the elevator, and I always joke because I say that, like Hegel, when Hegel saw Napoleon, he said, "I saw the history walking in front of me." So I can say that I saw the history going down in front of me, but metaphorically, Venezuela went down. So he destroyed everything. I mean, the inflation, the violence, censorship. I mean, before Chavez, of course, Venezuela had problems, but it was the longest democracy in the region. All the people from different countries went there to live. And after Chavez, all the people are emigrating from Venezuela. It's a disaster. So I realized the dangers of ideologies, about the danger of authoritarian and populist leaders. So I have always present that that experience. So I always try to, okay, this is very dangerous. It's not a game, like it can destroy millions of lives. After just two more things. After that, we decided with my wife to emigrate, just study abroad just for some years and then come back. Then we got a fellowship. I got a fellowship to study a master in theology at Boston College. I met wonderful people there, like Roberto Goizueta, Josman Ospino. I work for Josman Ospino in a research on Latino spirituality, Latino religiosity in the US. I also met Gustavo Gutierrez. He taught there during the summers. And there I realized that before that, for me, Latin American theology, it was like, oh, liberation theology, Marxism plus Christianity. I was not interested in that after the Hugo Chavez experience. But then I realized that there is a huge Christian intellectual tradition in Latin America that includes many thinkers, and even some liberation theologian or some theologian are they are anti-Marxist. For example, the Argentinian liberation theology is anti-Marxist, or the theology of the people. So I appreciate that, and because it's very common in Latin America that we don't appreciate people intellectuals from Latin America. For us, it's more like, oh, if he's French or German, oh, he must be a genius or something like that. But if he's from Latin America, no, we don't care. And this experience was useful for me to, okay, I can look also our traditions and see some concept that can be helpful. And finally, so I did a PhD in Latin American Studies at Georgetown University, and I finished my dissertation. But during the last year, I had wonderful professor too, wonderful people. But I saw three things that for me were annoying in some sense. The first one was that I met a lot of professors who were expert in critical theory, and they were expert in critical thinking and this and that. But they supported, for example, Hugo Chavez government and many other authoritarian governments around the world. And I saw that these professors who say that they are critical thinker, they are the least critical thinker that I have ever met. So for me, the idea that critical theory equals critical thinking or distant from ideologies, it's a lie, at least in my experience. The second thing, it is like I saw like some professors, some universities are creating like a bubble, like an elitist bubble that are very disconnected with reality, with the working class, and they are discussing things that nobody care or they are not connected with reality, and they feel like they have a moral superiority. And for me, this is problematic. And finally, what I saw is that uh, the conception of God and theology are always, you cannot introduce theology or God or supernatural concept in the debate in the humanities. It's like, no, this is not allowed. It's not allowed. And I don't know why in the humanities, because I mean, many people believe in God and we can talk about, but if you want to talk about religion, is something exotic or is anthropology of religion, but you cannot enter theology or well, Christian ideas too. So this is the three things that are the problem that I have seen, and I always try to answer that questions or those problems. Yeah.
And it sounds like the answers that you formulated you call pre-critical theory and magical realism. So could you expand on what those are?
Very critical, yes. So the thing is that I was working on modern Marian apparitions in my textbook. And because I saw that in the modern times, there was the greatest boom of Marian apparitions in the same countries that we always read that, for example, we read about France, and with the 19th century is the secularization, and we have, or well, Europe in general. We read, Marx and Freud and Nietzsche and this, but at the same time, there were a lot of Marian apparitions of thousands of people traveling through Europe, going to these small towns to see the supernatural, to see the miracles there. And it was like at the same time that these intellectual elites are promoting the secularization, at the same time you have these apparitions that, well, they are challenging in some sense the notion of the modern notion of society and reality. But I have two temptations in my research. One temptation is seeing this like, this is a Catholic Church strategy to gain people during a time that its power was declining. But the numbers makes this argument very weak, because in the last 200 years, there were about 1,000 Marian apparitions, and the Catholic Church only approved 8 after a long process that include agnostic scientists. So it's very weak to say that this is a Catholic Church strategy. And the other temptation that I had was, okay, I'm gonna say that it is a strategy from these small communities to gain power. So if they gain power, it's a reaction against this urban and against industrialization, secularization, and but if I pick that option, that approach, I would be on the side of the intellectual elites because this is like a Marxist analysis. It's saying, oh, it's the rich against the poor. So I wanted to find something different. So I wanted to, okay, I want to be on the side of these poor communities, and these poor communities, they felt that the world was enchanted. At least even today, some communities feel the enchantment of the world. So I want to be on their side. So in this sense, I try to find a different approach. And there I found in 2 Latin American articulations, Latin American theology and magical realism, something to produce what I call pre-critical theory. And theory is for me, it's if you see the etymology, is contemplation, how you contemplate the reality. And well, from Latin American theology, what I got is first the idea that every time the supernatural entered to the world, it challenged the structures. It challenges the structure, the social values. So every time there is a Christian revelation of something, it's like Christianity at the end doesn't like the comfort zone. So it's always has to challenge you. The second one was the preferential option for the poor, in the sense that if you are a Christian intellectual, or you have to be humble and say, you know what, maybe I don't know. Maybe these people that are humble, they know more than me. They are pointing something that I don't understand. So I'm gonna approach to this notion of reality. Maybe I can learn something from them. And finally, the idea of popular religiosity, which is a very important concept in Latin America. It was worked by sociologists and theologians. And it is the idea of, at the beginning, it was perceived as a group of practices and rituals and images without many concepts, but it was more a practice done by poor communities. And nevertheless, and also the idea of theologians like Enrique Dussel, they say that these practices, these communities are like a space of resistance against this modern totalitarian project to standardize everything. So these communities are like spaces of resistance. The problem with that is that many scholars try to apply the same concept, popular religiosity, to, for example, evangelical churches in poor communities, and the concept didn't fit. So the concept of popular religiosity didn't fit because many times they don't have rituals, they don't have images. Sometimes there are more personal relationships with God, are not communitarian. So they realize that popular religiosity is more a popular Catholicism. And in some sense, I agree with that, because I think that in some sense, when you read the authors that promoted secularization, in some sense, they are all against popular Catholicism. So they are against the pilgrimages. They are against the feast. They are against, I don't know, the Virgin Mary. And and all the celebrations. And some of them are fine if you reduce your religion to a matter of morality or something individual, personal. But if you just create like a community, that it's dangerous. At least they didn't like it. And there I found magical realism something very helpful for me to approach these Marian apparitions. Why? Because, well, first, as Gabriel Garcia Marquez, these great writers said, they wrote their novels based on their stories of their grandma, the grandmothers. So the story by their grandmothers are the base for their novels. So I'm not saying that they are Catholic, they were Catholic, but they had a popular Catholic culture behind. And when you distinguish magical realism with against other literary style, for example, fantasy, Tolkien. When you read Tolkien, Tolkien creates a different world where magic can happen. Or Harry Potter. Harry Potter, there are two worlds. In one, you can have magic. In the other, no. In magical realism, both are the same. So they are all together. So the reality is with magic. And other characteristic of magical realism is that it's different from, for example, postmodern literary novels or fantasy by, for example, Jorge Luis Borges. The thing is, in magical realism, is that there is no surprise. For example, we are talking here, and Lori says, "I have to go," and she started to fly. And for us, it's normal. Okay, let's continue talking. Nobody is surprised by that. In postmodern literary novels, if Lori flies, we start saying, "Oh, what happened? What is reality? Are we dreaming or not?" So there is an epistemological doubt there that we continue. But in magical realism, the natural and the supernatural are together, and nobody. I mean, it's normal. It's so in this sense, when I approach reality, especially Marian apparitions, I'm not saying, "Oh, this is true or false." Oh, it's there. I mean, it's there, and people believe it, and it's the community. I'm gonna believe them, and I try to believe it, and then analyze the Marian message behind. This is why I call this a pre-critical theory, pre-critical theory, and it is critical in the sense also because realism, magical realism, has something Thomistic there because it's before the Cartesian doubt. Is okay, the reality is there. There are the supernatural and reality is there, and I just have to analyze what is going on with reality, but I don't have to go through the doubt and the process of saying, "Oh, maybe it's a dream, or it's not a dream, or is it true or not?" It's there.
You answered a question I had, which was, how are we to, sort of think about these apparitions, or, and basically you're saying that we just take them at face value, we accept them because they happen, right?
Yeah.
And so we can sort of suspend judgment in a way and not even ask the question of truth or falsity because they are human experiences. I wanted to ask you, just, especially for listeners who maybe aren't familiar with Marian apparitions or, the Catholic tradition, of what the main themes are, because you focus on those apparitions so much. What are the main themes that you see across these experiences?
Yes. I have to say that when I study the modern Marian apparitions, they have some similar themes than medieval and ancient apparitions. The thing is that the context is different, so the themes they have a different meaning, or they can challenge other conception of the world. The first thing is that the Marian apparitions, the modern Marian apparitions, most of the time happened in small towns, small agricultural towns, insignificant towns. When you go to Fatima or Lourdes, they were small towns. Now they are bigger because the people that go there, but they were insignificant. In that places, Mary revealed herself to children or women mostly, without education. And suddenly the community start growing and going there. There are miracles. Most of the time, the apparition are in the middle of nature. Most of the time, there are like rivers with supernatural healing powers, and also there are a connection with the institution, which is not opposed to the institution, but it is a dialogue there. So it is like there are priests that are against and there are priests that are in favor. So there is a dialogue there. What I saw there, one of the theme is that this is a community. When you read Charles Taylor description of the pre-modern social imaginary or the pre-modern worldview, it's there. It's there. It's a community connected with the supernatural. They had an organic connection with nature and with tradition and with the institutions. What else? Basically, and they are ritualistic, so they follow some rituals. And of course, in a context of Middle Ages, this is not something challenging in some sense, but if it happened in the middle of Europe in the secular age, it's challenging the worldview of Europe. And something interesting, if you go back to tradition, in Catholic tradition, the first Christians in the first centuries, they defended Mary as Mother of God. And the Mary of Mother of God was against one heresy, which was Nestorianism, who wanted to divide the divine nature of Jesus and the human nature of Jesus. So in some sense, Mary was the defender of the unity between the divine and nature, the supernatural and the natural world. And in modern apparition, is the same. So Mary is like the defender of, okay, the world is still enchanted. It's there, here. Always Mary points to Jesus. It's not like just pray to me. It's more pray to Jesus. But this is one of the theme. The second theme is Mary is the mother of all nations. When Mary revealed herself, she speaks the language of the locals. She wears the clothes of the locals. For example, in Lourdes, and in the apparition of Lourdes, which is one of the main famous apparitions, she spoke Occitano, which is not French. It's a language of one region. So if you contrast that with the national states, modern national states, the idea that we belong to a same unity in this territory, or the idea of these liberal elites that they wanted to just erase culture, it's very well. These revelations are challenging these notions. Mary is the same because Mary is always the same. Is the mother of Jesus. Is always the same, but at the same time, it's different in every local community. It has their skin color, or so this relation between the local and the global is very interesting. The third is maybe the idea that Mary reveals the truth as a person, not as an idea. So it's a person, it's a close and kind person that is showing you the truth that it's a person, and it is not an idea like many intellectuals think sometimes that, oh, the truth is some ideas. In this case, it's a person, and you don't need an intellectual effort to get the truth. It's more like a revelation. You have to be a humble heart and just be open and accept the truth. You'd have to accept mystery. And if you compare with what the intellectual elites were proposing, the idea that with my reason I can understand truth and then understand all the reality, and in some sense this is totally different. And here I am going to connect again with the Catholic tradition, because also the first Christian in the first centuries were reacting against Gnosticism, because the Gnostic Mary was an enemy in some sense, because he's the earthly, is the material part of Jesus. So the idea that Mary the first Christian promoted Mary as Mother of God against Gnosticism. And here I connected with, I know you, Laurie, are expert in Eric Voegelin, the idea that modern ideologies, in some sense, has something similar to Gnosticism. The idea that there is an elite that can grasp the reality through an epistemological effort. Mary, in the modern Marian apparition, is saying a different thing. So it's like the humbles, the people sometimes without education, but they have a humble heart, they can grasp the truth. I have two more. Another is the preservation of life. In those contexts, people are poor, and usually they go to the place to find healing, or they are hungry, or there is a conflict. So life is so important. So mother is the protector of life. And also you can see in the Gospels, like the protector of the baby Jesus, and there is a long tradition. And finally, something very interesting is that it has a very apocalyptic dimension. So the Marian apparitions are very apocalyptic. They're saying, you guys are on the wrong track. This is going to go badly. And they predicted many things. For example, the Russian Revolution and the World War I, World War II, the totalitarian regimes. So there are all these predictions behind the Marian apparitions. But at the end, there are mercy. I mean, there are mercies. Okay, just repent and change your behavior and you will be fine. But if you contrast these messages with the intellectual elites that are saying, you know what, we have the progress, we are going to change the world, we are going to be happy forever. So it's a contrast. It's a huge contrast there.
Well, and kind of on riffing on those last 2 points, can you talk about how you've characterized the seers as conservationists as opposed to conservatives?
Yes, I saw that as I said, as the idea of preservation of life. That was very important for the seers and the people that went to that places. And sometimes some politicians during those years, they tried to use the Marian apparitions to come back to the monarchy or to other regimes in the past. But they were surprised how little the seers knew about politics. They didn't know anything about politics, because they were like, they didn't know who was the president, or who was the political ideals, or nothing. They just were like small children or women that they were trying to survive. And in other sense, they were not, I mean, their connection with nature, they were not like the Romantics. The Romantics were mostly artists that lived in cities, and they wanted to come back to nature, and they have a more idealized idea of nature. In this case, they were people who work inside nature. So they work, I mean, they knew what nature can do. I mean, they can do good things and bad things too, because they depended on their farming and their so they didn't have this romantic idea of nature. It was more the daily. I mean, it was more to survive, to survive. It was okay. The supernatural enter into the nature to help us to survive, to survive, to heal, to have more food, and I think this is why I think it's more conservationist, because they depend on nature, and the supernatural help them to survive, and yeah.
And so how do you distinguish them between the conservatives in their milieu that seek to like appropriate the Marian message for their own like political purposes?
Yes, the politician they wanted to use, and I think I always in my book I explain the self-coronation of Napoleon, Napoleon's self-coronation, in which Napoleon made an agreement with the church for the pacification of France and to have more power. So he invited the Pope, but the Pope was present, but at the end he put the crown to himself. So for me, this is a symbol of ideology. I have to justify with that immanent frame why I have to be in power. In some sense. On the other hand, but they don't adopt it. Many conservative. I know it's big. The conservation. I mean, the conservative movement is. I don't want to reduce the complexity, but I think that the supernatural is something. It's not. A player in the political arena. I mean, they think with modern categories. We have to come back to the past, but I am in control. I have the power to produce a new government. And actually, when you see, for example, the people who created ideology, for example, the student of Tracy, this is the guy that created the word ideology. It was after the French Revolution, and his disciple, they were very anti-Christian and anti-Catholic. They were deeply anti-Catholic, and actually, they wanted to create a science to replace Christianity, to replace the Catholic Church in some sense. And they supported Napoleon, but they broke with Napoleon when Napoleon did an agreement with the Catholic Church. So they broke with Napoleon. And so I think that most ideologies has this component of anti-Christian, anti-Catholic, at least the conception of the world, the pre-modern conception of the world, that the world is not enchanted anymore, or the world, I'm in charge of politics, I'm in charge of the world now, and I'm gonna use Christianity, but it's a component so I can gain power and I can be in charge. But it's not that the supernatural is in charge. It's not that the God is in charge, but I'm in charge, but I need Christianity to make sense of my position, my ideology. Maybe I'm reducing the complexity, but it's one of my ideas.
And I love how you talk about further in the book, you talk about how, well, actually, I'll just read the section real quick. You wrote, many of the conservative proposals of the 19th and 20th century somehow recreated Napoleon's coronation. The symbols of religion represented only a legitimizing adornment, while true power ultimately lay in modern autonomous categories of self-control and order. And I think it reminds me of somewhere in After Virtue, McIntyre says basically a similar thing that first people like Napoleon embody these kind of modern Hobbesian, Machiavellian, proto-liberal notions in their behavior. And then even the people that think they are not that, and in fact, they're fighting against that,
Yes.
Get pulled into still basically becoming that.
Yes.
Yeah,
and actually, after that, Napoleon put in jail the Pope, so put the Pope in jail. So this relationship with Christianity, for example, with some conservative position, is a relationship that it helps me to gain power, but then don't tell me what I have to do. So I'm in charge now. So I gain power and I'm in charge. In charge. So yeah. I agree. Yeah.
I just kind of wanted to follow up too. I feel like there is an argument that this represents a kind of political position in the sense that it is resisting modernity or resisting ideologies, not in a sort of intellectual way, but in kind of an organic way, which has functioned sometimes in the past to like resist revolutions, for instance. And I don't know if we want to call that a type of conservative position or traditionalism or something like that, but I mean, it seems like a sort of almost instinctual conservative position, as in this is our organic life, this is,
Yeah.
who we are. We don't want this. I mean, is that fair to say, or am I
Yes.
off?
Yes, I don't want to reduce the complexity of conservatism. The main difference, what I saw is that this popular Catholicism, they were led by women or children, and it was, I mean, they didn't propose any particular alternative in the sense that they just wanted to live. Just they thought that Mary was there, and they felt the supernatural, and there were rituals, and there were miracles. And I think that one of the point that I did in my book is that there is a tendency to reduce religion to morality and politics, and I think they are resisting that in some sense. They of course it's a complex. There are many apparitions. I don't want to reduce the complexity, but in general, they didn't want to create like a political project which is an alternative to what they were seeing. It was more like, okay, there is the supernatural here, there is a message. We have to return to the rituals and to put God in the center. But of course, there are many actors. Some of them just they saw this as a source for resistance and to find alternatives. For example, with Fatima, with the Virgin of Fatima, it became a symbol against Russia, the Soviet Union, because the Virgin of Fatima predicted the Russia disaster and the totalitarian regime. So there were a lot of groups against these communist countries that they just put the Virgin Mary as a symbol against communism. But well, I agree with you. It can be seen as a type of conservative, but they don't want to. I don't think they are trying to create a different political system. They just wanted to just find the supernatural. Yeah.
That's fair. And just to follow up on that, how just maybe say a little bit more about how the apparitions and the closeness to Mary, how what kind of function, if we had to say, if we had to kind of I know this is kind of foreign to the way of thinking itself, but if we had to look and say, this is providing these people with, what would we say? Tighter knit community,
Yes.
psychological health. I mean,
Yes. Well, yes. One thing is they promote stronger communities. Absolutely. You can see in the Marian apparition, and even today, if you travel to Fatima or Lourdes or other places, there are people from all the nationalities, all the social classes, and they are together, and they are with candles praying together. uh just yeah, just it's a strong community. Also, there are organizations around this community, so it starts to connect people. And I think if you contrast this community with the process of urbanization, individualization, and secularization, this is very important. The second, I think, they give meaning to many people's meaning to their lives. Um, Something very interesting about the Marian apparitions is that the domestic space is very important. Uh, Usually, in modern notion, the most important part are the public space where we can debate about politics or this or that. But in Marian apparition, the domestic space is the most important part. So it's where people live, where they connect with their family, so I think they get meaning to their lives. And and I would say finally, the idea that it's in some sense these apparitions challenge the social values. I mean, the first are the last, and the last are the first. It's they show that the values of the world are not the most important values, and I think this is important, especially if you live in these communities, these poor communities, and they were feeling that, oh, we have been chosen by the supernatural, and we live in this insignificant town, but we are most important than those who live in Paris, for example.
Right. And one of the things you talk about in a number of the apparitions, like specifically where there's either like visible miracles or like healings, that there's this tension between there's like secular elites and the experts, like the doctors that know that, of course, miracles like that can't happen. And then there's a draw of at least the local population to like still come out and see and hopefully be cured and get like supernatural aid, but for to some extent natural purposes, right?
Absolutely, yes. And there is a process of, um, yes, and many elites were against the Marian apparitions. So it was a process of just eliminate all the Marian apparitions, and they were saying in newspapers, this is superstition, this has no value. Nevertheless, the people continue to go there to that places, millions of people, and they were healings and many things. So it was it, they are challenging for many intellectual elites and and political elites. And even today, I think that this manifestation of popular Catholicism in Europe or in the Americas, it's challenging because they don't know what to do with that. It's like, what, a miracle and pilgrimage and this and images, and it's for many it's kind of weird, and they say it's superstition. You can say, well, I'm Christian, I following these values, and I will behave very well, and people accept that. But if they say, well, I'm in the community, I'm gonna pray and with candles and some rituals, and people are not very comfortable with that.
Right. And to me, it resonates as well with like at least my understanding of the devotion centering around the Sacred Heart, that in the same way that you're saying this is coming from like the home, the hearth,
Yeah.
I've heard people defend the Sacred Heart in similar ways, that like as society we were going down this like cold rationalistic
Yeah.
road. Then here's this other devotion to say like, no, it's love and heat. And
Absolutely. Yes. And yes, absolutely. And there's another devotion which I include in my book, but also in my first book. For me, it's very important. My goal is in the future to maybe do a philosophy of mercy. The idea of mercy, it came from misericordia, which means to feel the misery of others in your heart. And also, if you compare mercy with compassion and empathy, empathy is to experience what the other are experiencing. So you feel what the other are doing and are feeling, but you don't have to do anything. Just it's an experience. With compassion, is you feel the pain of other. Compassion, so passion is suffering. With is with you feel the passion of other, and you do something. But misericordia, which is mercy, it's you feel the pain of others, but the suffering of others is deserved. So in compassion, the other is suffering, but it was not his or her fault. It's like a illness. But in misericordia, in mercy, the other person is suffering, but he or she deserved that. Nevertheless, you feel the pain of others and just do something. It's like love your enemy in some sense. So and in the Marian apparition, mercy is very important, and I think it has a very powerful, as you said today, and actually in the modern times, all the philosophers were against mercy, like many of them, like Kant. Kant is mercy is not good because it is against justice and the law and impartiality. The same with the utilitarian philosophers, they don't like mercy. You don't have to feel the pain of others, and I think that the divine mercy and all the devotion about mercy are very important because are saying the same like Sacred Heart. Just feel the pain of others.
So you've been in the United States for a while now, and I'm sure you've noticed this is a very secular country where even most Catholics are not in the frame of mind to follow this aspect of their own faith, right? But I've noticed that the Hispanic churches do tend to still do that, but a lot of other Catholic churches do not really. And I was wondering if what your book and what your research has to say to American Catholics, who are non-Hispanics, who aren't as familiar as they ought to be with these traditions.
Yes. Well, what I would say is that we have to look this popular Catholicism not as a superstition, but we have to be humble and just maybe there's something there. If you see an old lady, an old Latina with a candle going at night and praying, there is something. It has a theological value there. And yes, Latinos are very. Because in Latin America we didn't have a lot of priests since the colonial period. So many towns, they didn't have priests. So most of the churches were led by women. Actually, today, if you go to a church in Latin America, 80% of the people there are women, and they are leading the church. So I think that there something valuable there. And also what I saw in the US, which for me is very strange, but I'm seeing like a movement of what is called traditional Catholics, which for me it was very strange. I don't agree with some aspect, but I think they have a point when they emphasize, for example, the Latin Mass. and many of them don't understand Latin, but they are just saying, you know what? I don't want to talk about morality or just morality, just something morality, but not all about morality or politics. I just want to be there in the church and just contemplate the sacred and yeah and be there and just praying, and there is something there very interesting, and I know that it's growing and growing among young people, which is very interesting. I For me it's very strange, but I found it very interesting.
Yes, I laughed because I mean that's such a I have so noticed at this point how much not just American Catholics, but American Christians generally equate their religion with morality and politics. And it's so deeply ingrained that they don't know what you're talking about when you say that's not all it is.
Absolutely.
So these things do help people connect with these other aspects, the supernatural aspects of their faith.
Yeah, I agree, and you can see the decline of religion always came when you transform religion in a morality, in a political movement. It's always like that. In Spain, for example, Spain was a very Catholic country, but then Franco took Catholicism and transformed it in a like a political movement. And after Franco, Spain is very secular. And this happened a lot in different countries when they politicize or just. I'm not saying that religion has, of course, it has a morality aspect, but it's not just morality or politics.
And I feel like part of what you're doing and part of your book is tracing the history of these modern Marian apparitions, but the other part is kind of tracing the history politically and economically through modern history and like noting the tension between how there is this wave of what's typically called secularism in the broadest sense and the different like internecine feuds between different kinds of secularism, and then on the outskirts you have these these homes where for lack of a better term, the fires of the Sacred Hearts and the Immaculate Heart is still burning, um, and yet but even most believers are still largely conditioned by secularism and in America liberalism.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. Yes. This it was hard for me to. It is a process. Maybe I fall into some modern categories, maybe, or postmodern categories. It's very hard to escape from your intellectual context, but it was my first effort to just try to move from this intellectual context and find other way of thinking about the supernatural and society. Um, for example, what I see when you talk with people, for example, they identify evil with an immanent frame. They say, "Oh, evil is something fixed that you can point and say, okay, I'm going to solve evil." But in a pre-critical theory or a pre-critical conception, evil is, it can be everywhere, and you have to discern all the time. Maybe evil is close to you, or you don't know where is evil. It's very, you cannot eliminate evil. You can avoid temptation or you can avoid evil, but it's not something fixed. It's capitalism or it's socialism or it's more complex. It's moving around and it's moving everywhere. So uh, this is one of the things that I think we have to move away from that conceptions. Um,
Sure. Yeah. These ideological conceptions.
exactly.
So how would you say, how does all of this intersect with ecological concerns, would you say?
Uh, yes, I think that I in my book I use one concept pointed out by Roberto Goizueta, a theologian, that pointed out that there is a difference between praxis, Aristotle notion of practice, and the modern notion of practice. Praxis, for Aristotle, according to Roberto Goizueta, it is a good in itself. For example, I live. So live is good, and I'm fine with that. But in the modern notion of praxis, you always have to produce something. So the most important part is a product, what you produce. And I think this notion of the pre-critical or pre-modern notion of praxis, it can be helpful for ecology. The idea that I'm living and this is important. I don't have to produce something else. I'm here, I'm producing, I'm living. I can live with what I have. But this obsession of modernity to produce something more, and the meaning of my life is what I produce at the end. I think these have very bad consequences for the environment and for the community, for the families. People are always trying to find something else, and also the idea of rituals. So I think the idea, I think the Catholic idea of nature is there is a connection with the supernatural, and nature is good in itself. Of course, it has sin, but it's good in itself, and it's connected with different higher reality. And I think if you eliminate this connection with the higher reality, it can become just a thing to manipulate or to produce something.
Yeah, I was just going to point out, I had the same thing in mind in the second to the last paragraph in your book. So pretty important point that you want to bring home. You mention the climate crisis. You say, I'll just read the paragraph. Pre-critical theory reacts against the Marxist and utilitarian praxis that reigns in societies today by measuring every event or idea in terms of a product. Such an attitude leads to the instrumentalization of human beings and the environment, the acceleration of productivity without due regard for the need to contemplate the actual meaning of human life, and the vulnerability of humanity in the face of the climate crisis and growing tensions between nuclear-armed world powers. I just thought that was it made me want to ask you to write another book now on this connection, because I feel like that could really help a lot of Christians to reevaluate their faith, to realize that, not only does our current attitude lend itself to the climate crisis, creates the climate crisis, but that reevaluating and opening ourselves up to a higher power, so to speak, to being able to actually absorb that, could change us in ways that make it easier to avoid further problems. Right now, we're fighting our what feels like our basic instinctual, selves, which is really just our capitalist selves, right? That our liberal capitalist selves that we've come to think of as reality itself. So yeah, I mean, like, what are your can you say a little bit more about, your thoughts on the climate crisis and how what you're researching can help?
Yes. I think that for me, I'm afraid of three phenomena in our days. And I think we are in risk as a humanity. I think one is the tension between empires that are growing and with unstable politicians. So it's growing and growing and growing with nuclear power. So we are in risk of that. The second is the environment. The contamination is horrible, and more we're producing more things that we don't need, and the situation is critical. And technology, AI, and how it doesn't have any morality behind, and what we are going to do with the AI and the guns, the guns machine that can be controlled by the AI. So there is no control. And I think these three processes started in the 19th century. So they are all linked, like capitalism plus the imperialism plus the destruction of environment. So they are all together and moving together. And I think that the Marian apparitions, they can be seen as a reaction or as a critic to this movement, to this new project. You have many reactions. You have romanticism, you have, I don't know, traditionalism. You have many reactions that are pointing out that something is wrong with them. And I think that Marian apparition or popular Catholicism, it has something that, I mean, it's saying that this is something wrong. We are on the wrong track. Maybe we have to rethink our society, our modern project, because we can disappear as a as a humanity.
Well, and I tend to think about it, and maybe this is too reductive and ideological of a way to think about it, but to me, it's at least a way to start thinking about it. Is that like at the core of it is your conception of reality, you know, when we're theorizing about what reality is? Is it, is there a nature? Like, is there an essence to how things are, and we need to a large degree, respect nature? Or is everything potentially artifice and it's all just plastic and for us to like remold according to the whims of our will? Would you tentatively agree with that way of looking at things?
No, I have a more Thomistic way of understanding nature. There's something, I mean, there's something sacred in nature, and there are some goals in nature, and yeah, I think that is sacred. Nature is sacred in some sense, um, and I mean, we have to take care of nature. And I was reading that some theories about the existence of God, and one of them is that the idea that in order to create, to be life in this planet, the factors have to be so perfect that it is almost impossible to think that it was by chance. So in some sense, life and nature and life is a miracle in the sense that it is a sign of a designer or so. I think that when you think that you are in the middle of the space, millions of galaxies, and there is no life everywhere, and you have life, and you're destroying your only little planet, it's like insane. It's like it is insane.
But Jeff Bezos says that we can all live in space.
Yes, that's true. Maybe he can live, but maybe we don't have the money.
No, that just represents the ultimate, opposite point of
Absolutely.
view.
Yes, I agree. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh,
But people, I mean, and what I find very interesting is that conservatives, for me, it will be natural to be in favor of conservation of nature. I mean, it's for me, it will be more natural to be, I mean, to protect the environment. But it's weird how ideologies just put together that in some sense they are they are on the other side. But it is very interesting.
Sure, and that's part of, you know, the part of the inspiration for our podcast name was the classic Marx line about everything solid melts into air, all that's sacred is profaned. And since we're like, you know, depending on how you measure it, 500 years into modernity, what you're saying is weird. You would think conservatives would want to care for the environment. But the way things have arranged is most conservatives have received this way of looking at the world that actually environmental concerns it's like the people worried about that are a coalition of nature worshipers,
Exactly.
global elites that want to depopulate the environment, political radicals that want to dismantle capitalism, um, and all of which, I mean, those people are out there, but it then doesn't mean you can't be concerned about the environment because people you don't like are opposed to. And then slides in as well, you know, we were talking about how evil's everywhere, and then slides in a kind of nihilistic thread in our religion that says, like, well, this all is you know, impermanent. One day there will be a new world. So, like, what are you gonna do? Uh, find some way to save the environment and politically outmaneuver all of these bad agents that do care about the environment. Um,
Yeah,
that's not like a happy thought.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah,
And
I
what do you do
agree.
with that? Yeah.
And I think that also it's also sometimes it's bad theology behind many conception of nature. It's like saying that, oh, nature is something that I can manipulate, and the important part is myself, and there is something wrong with that. I think it's bad theology sometimes, that transforming ideologies or conception of reality.
Right. And personally, I don't know how they sleep with it when you end up with some of these strange bedfellows. Like, let's grant all of that. So therefore, like, it is Chevron and Royal Dutch Shell and the military industrial complex, are they on the side of the angels because they're opposed to the woke environmentalists? Um, but I don't know. A lot of people seem to be able to sleep with those bedfellows in bed with them. So
Yeah, yes.
anyway, that's a rant. I don't know if you have anything to say about that. But.
Yeah, well, I agree with what you said, and I think that the problem with nature and environment is that you don't have once it's done. I mean, there is no coming back. So that's the problem because they wanna prove that they are right, but if they are wrong, if they're these guys that are against take care of the environment, they are wrong. So we don't have other chance. So that's the problem. They want to see proof, but maybe the proof will be very late, and we don't have other alternatives. Um,
Right. Well, I mean, what Spencer just described there is people of a different faith who are just so deeply, attached to their faith that they can't see what's in front of them. I mean, it's a warped modern faith, but I really do think it's kind of faith. And instead of the genuine article, they've adopted their own sort of ideological faith, and it drives them with blinders on, you
exactly.
know. Um, I don't know if Spencer has any other questions.
Just to make sure we talk about where pre-critical theory is going. And then do you have
Right.
compatriots in this?
Yes, we wanted to know that, right? Are you kind of like almost the founder of this way of thinking, or are there others that you can kind of identify with? Yeah.
To be true, I mean, there are many people who are saying this. I mean, not the same like me because I'm using Latin American concept, but I think there is many people, and I will include you too, that are saying something is wrong in the world, and maybe we have to find alternatives, intellectual concept alternatives. Um, I would say that there are many people with this movement of post-liberal thinking that are like saying, okay, the liberal order is not neutral. We have to rethink this. Let's bring religion again on the table and just find other alternatives. Um, yeah, to be honest, I found my guide is Pope Francis, to be honest. So Pope Francis for me is uh, actually he's the followers. He's one of the followers of the theology of the people. So the what I'm using, and he had good insights. Sometimes, as he's Argentinian, he speaks a lot, and some people in the U.S. maybe are confused because it is a way of, it's a cultural way, it's a cultural way of talking, but he has good points, and he's trying to show us at least a different path. Um, but you can see that in Argentina, for example, people criticize because he's Peronista or he's not Peronista. Here they say he's liberal, he's conservative, and every country just pick one side or the other. But I think that he's doing a good job to just pointing out in a difficult context, just showing maybe we can be merciful. I mean, be merciful and the environment, and just take care of the poor, inequality, and I think he has a lot of points that for me, it's inspiring.
Yeah.
Well, that does for me raise the question. I've wondered to what extent part of what makes him so confusing for American Catholics is less that, like you're saying, he doesn't neatly fit into some category of, is he liberal? Is he conservative? Is he a liberation theologian? Does he believe in the theology of the people? Is he a moderate? Is he, or sorry, is he a modernist of some sort? Is he orthodox? And I wonder to what extent is it just like a culture shock that it's less that he's any of these things and more like he thinks like a South American, and we're trying to put him into like Anglo-American intellectual categories that he doesn't fit into. What would you say to that?
I think so, yes. Nevertheless, the Latin Americans are also confused sometimes. I think he's speaking to all the world. So there are categories that, I mean, every country has their political views, and sometimes they take one, especially with social media, people just take one word or one sentence, and they don't read the entire document. But I think yes, he's sometimes his words are annoying, and I think it's good to be like that. I mean, I think the Christian message has to be annoying sometimes, and just try to figure out what is wrong with me, and maybe I'm on the side, on the wrong side, or but now people want to just, oh, it's my faith. They have to think like me, and if not, they are wrong. And maybe we have to be open to be challenged, and yeah, try to think. Maybe he has a point.
Yeah, he's in the mode of prophecy. He's basically saying not what's right with you, but what's wrong with you in a life. Or at least that's the
Exactly.
part that annoys people. And it's not the usual just morality message, right? And
Exactly.
and so, he's going to the heart of, you'd have to actually change your behavior. You might not make, endless growth the number one goal.
Exactly.
You might give more of your, wealth to the poor, and so on and so forth. And these are things that people just don't want to do. And so, of
Exactly.
course,
Exactly.
it's annoying. And I like that word annoying. I hadn't thought of it that way, but it's like the gadfly, like the Socratic gadfly, right? Just
Exactly.
making you itch, right? Um, I think yeah, I agree. It's probably that basic in a way, but like all the prophets, he just seems to accept being annoying and just goes on.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So what's next for you? What are you working on now?
As I said, I'm trying to work on the concept of mercy, and the idea that mercy has, in the biblical sense, it has two dimensions. One is the idea that help the poor, help those in need, but at the same time, it has the dimension of forgiveness and love your enemy. So I think there are many liberation movements that are, I'm gonna help the poor, but I'm gonna hate my enemy. I'm gonna disappear my enemy. So I think mercy has a great component, which is, okay, both has to be together. You cannot help the poor and hate your enemy. And one thing about mercy is that you have to be on top. I mean, you have to do justice, because you cannot be merciful with an authoritarian leader. You have to have the power to be merciful. So it doesn't mean that mercy is against justice. I mean, you do justice, but at the end, you love your enemy too. So you have to help them understand and forgive them. I mean, forgive them. No, I mean they have to pay some price, of course, but you love them. You will. Love is to will the good of the other. So you want the best for them too. And I think in Latin America happened a lot that this liberation movement, they hate the enemy, so they want to disappear others. And also in politics in the US, for example, you have the two extremes, cancel culture, or the other extreme. They are merciless. They don't, you don't, I mean, you cannot have any mistake because they are going to kill you in all sense. So I think this mercy can be a concept that can help us to there are things that are good, there are things that are bad, but our predisposition to others has to be merciful in some sense.
Are we talking about maybe a book then on that? A whole book?
Maybe I'm working on it. It's I don't
Okay.
know how I will start.
And then this is I don't know how to exactly phrase this, but are you connected? I mean, you're obviously Catholic, but like, are you connected with the institutional church in the sense that you could perhaps publish or speak in areas where people would hear your message who are influential in the church? Would that be an aspiration for you?
Yes. I'm always trying to connect with. I work in a small chap and a small church, and I work with the Catholic ministry in my university.
Mhm.
I think that faith has to be lived together in a community. I think so, and I always try to be involved in the communities. But yeah, my goal is maybe in the future just connect with other levels and try to well, I don't know, just give my talents to
Mhm.
God's purpose. Like, but I don't, yeah, I will try to find my way, but my vocation, how I perceive myself is like a Christian or Catholic, well, Christian intellectual. So I'm gonna try to help others to be closer to God and to live a better life and help others people, especially those in need. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I hope you do. I want to see this happen, so I'm going to be
Thank you so much.
I'll follow your career.
Yeah, and thank you for writing this excellent book.
Hmm.
Thank you so much. And it was a pleasure talking with you. And as I said before, I think your channel and your podcast are amazing. I mean, I am a follower.
Thank you. Well, now we are followers too, so really impressive, and yeah, we wish you the best.